Hi, everyone. My name is Yami. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm calling today from land that has been loved and stewarded and resisted on by the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I work for the Ontario Nonprofit Network as the Network Engagement Manager, and this video is diving into the decent work pathways and stories from the sector about how different organizations are engaging with decent work in their own language and in their own ways. And I'm so grateful that Chris Archie from the Circle is here with me and that we'll be talking a bit about wellness and their pathways towards a shared future. And so I'll take a moment and invite Chris, you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jem. Wake and Awake, Chris Archie runs Squest Sequatins Gamble from Seskin. I'm the CEO with the Circle of Philanthropy, and I'm so delighted to be in conversation with you. I am such a fan of the good work that's happening at ONN on these issues and topics, and just like honored that we could be in conversation to share a bit about what we're doing, what we're learning, and what we're trying out at the Circle.
I should share that part of the reason why I'm really excited to connect with you on these issues is because we have been in different spheres in this sector, but also worked and engaged in conversations around what it means to work well in community, what it means to work in ways that are deeply reciprocal. And I'm grateful for that journey with the Circle, the art of hosting, and those practices. And so in our conversation today, we are going to be focusing on wellness. And as the CEO, the leader, or one of the leaders, and maybe you could talk a bit about that within the organization, really wanted to talk about the path towards a shared future. And, prior to jumping on this call, we talked a bit about how those principles were really critical to informing how you folks at the Circle, as a staff team, as a team that works with different employees around wellness and integrating that. So would love to hear about that process, the principles, and how it's showing up in day to day.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, oh my goodness, where to begin? I would say that the seed for our seasonal pathway, which is the orientation to how we both operationalize and govern our work here at the Circle and Philanthropy, was born out of sitting here in my home territories outside of my aunt's house in that time when kind of winter's beginning to flow into spring. And I was really wondering about how the work that Shireen and I were doing could be more sustainable. This was in 2018. We've been doing the work together for about 8 months at that time. And it was feeling really tough. It was feeling very hectic. And I was really just sitting outside in the brisk air, asking, the land for some wisdom about how to be in the work differently. And what came to me was just this really clear kind of awareness that my ancestors had been in this time and place for a long time, and that they physically had a way of existing in relationship to the land that meant that they had to have a relationship to how their bodies needed to move and in which seasons would require more energy and what kinds of energy, physical energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, etc. And so it started to grow out of that time here in Seskin, was a conversation between Shireen and I about what was the rhythm of our work and how could we naturally align it to a seasonal pathway through winter, spring, summer, and fall. And what we observed was that the settler philanthropic sector has two very busy seasons each year, and that's the spring season and the fall season. And those seasons are marked by conferences, by publications, by AGMs, and also by funding cycles in lots of ways.
Right.
So fast forward, as we continue as a team, both to grow, but to evolve a shared leadership model for how we steward the specific kind of technical and relational labor of each of these seasons here at the Circle. The board also wanted to bring this thinking and behavior to the governance space. And out of that, after 2.5 years of conversation, was this beautiful offering we've just made public in our year in review, which is called A Pathway Toward a Shared Future.
How is it landing within the organization? How is it landing? It was a labor of
It
love.
was,
So
yeah, it's a total labor of love. It went through many iterations because the board made a commitment in 2019 to spend 2 years in these very thoughtful seasonal conversations. So we had these longer board meetings quarterly through each year that was specifically aligned to the seasons. And then, the next year during the retreat period or the board retreat period, they would kind of deepen into it. So it was an iterative piece of work at the board level, at the governance level. And then at the staff level, I was really just doing what I could to both bring the team into some shared practices and behaviors for how to be in this work differently, that it wasn't always about what we were doing. It was as much about how we were doing it. So one of the beliefs that I carry quite strongly about transformation and systems change is that we can tell that the quality of the relationships inside of a system based on the quality of an interaction between two people. So what is the interaction between two people? How does that feel? What is the behavior? And when you witness or observe enough of those, you can get a flavor for what is tricky or damaged or needs some extra energy and time and care in a system for transformation. So when I presented a first draft to the team, actually, I shared it first with Shireen because she's been by my side in this work since the beginning. And it was what she said was just, this feels like such a clear representation of the work we do. And it does share how we do our work uniquely. And we carried forward sharing it with the team and with the board. And so we work in multiple layers. We work at depth, and we work where relationship is a primary behavior that we nurture. And I think this looks and feels and sounds differently than other kinds of what folks would consider to be a strategic plan. Right. And I don't care. I actually am really thankful that it looks and feels differently, because that's what we wanted to do, was to create something that was alive, that was beautiful, and that wasn't about just being some kind of aspirational words on paper, but that they were a demonstrable pathway for how we want to do this work, and ultimately how we invite others to be in this work alongside us.
And how has this impacted wellness on the team, like with yourself and Shireen? Shout out to you, Shireen. Yeah, how has it impacted? Because there's that internal decision is what I'm thinking, and then there's that external facing reality. And I'm thinking also about in the context of working with settler-led organizations and whatnot, and but I'll leave it there.
Well, I think there is some deep gratitude that we have, both a board, and I have deep gratitude to the board and to the team for being in these conversations and in this iterative space, and really being committed to truly demonstrating that we do think and do things differently. I would say that our team is now in a space of really sinking into their roles more and more. We have actually at least one person in every one of the seasonal steward roles, and our team continues to build. And so, this here is for them to be given some thinking about, but I think the added clarity about who our priority audience is, I think, is a helpful discernment tool. And I think all people should have, tools for discernment in their work.
Mm,
And so I think that's been really helpful for folks. I feel like being clear about the spaces where each of the stewards kind of prioritize their engagement and their energy is also helpful, because it's an added layer of kind of, is this space a space that makes sense for us or not? Or are there other team members or other organizations that we might actually bring into the space instead? And of course, we care a lot about convening and about hosting people well. And so being able to indicate kind of what is our priority energy for that work,
mm,
I think gives folks a sense of creativity and clarity. And that every single season has a focus of wisdom creation and sharing and learning, which I believe deeply investing in practices and a workplace that um, prioritizes learning and learning by doing
mm,
is the kind of space that enables people's creativity to show up. I think that it activates leadership in a very different way when I can be operating from a space of, I don't know, but I can try this, or I can attempt that, and I can see it as an opportunity for learning and growth personally and within the organization and within the sector. I think kind of removing the kind of punitive behavior of many
right.
other kinds of ways of working really does something to the body, to the physical, kind of how you get to show up to work. But ultimately, I would say that there is also pride in the fact that this work, it invites leadership to show up in a myriad of ways. It
Mm,
recognizes that leadership doesn't look or feel or sound only one way.
mm,
And we exist in a sector that is predominantly led by women. And it's about time that we're starting to showcase and demonstrate that either Indigenous or Black or racialized or queer or disabled or trans folks have their voices, their experience, their wisdom reflected in this sector. And so I feel a little bit like there's likely organizations who would look at this and not understand it,
mm.
and that's okay, because it's not really for them. It's for us first and foremost. It's for our members first and foremost. Um, and the other invitation is like, when we invite people into spaces and they feel a little ungrounded, that often it's a reflection of how deeply we care about decentering whiteness in our workplaces and in the spaces we convene and host. And if this work does that for folks, then I feel like that's an additional gift that we have to offer when we make this stuff visible. Um,
Mm,
I'd like to just highlight that the principles of this work are about abundance, reciprocity, accountability, and curiosity. And I would say that um, abundance is aligned to the work of the winter season, and the winter season for us is about operation and administration and governance.
okay.
And so often people would consider that winter is not a very abundant time.
No.
But in kind of where I live and in my own teachings, winter is a time for abundance and the gratitude for being alive and having what you need to get through hard winters. And so, an orientation in that space of budgets and governance and thinking about the year ahead and planning, it invites a different frame, a different mindset to how we care about people. And so it means that we put first and foremost the care and well-being of the team, to our board members and to the partners we work alongside, that it's not an afterthought.
Something that sprang up for me as you were talking. So the winter season has a set of priorities in terms of the alignment there. And I also really love that you speak to co-leadership models and because a leader can look like different things. And so it also supports, and maybe you can share a bit more about this, the leadership of the different styles of team, because I think often there's this assumption that mentorship can only look, or supporting the development of workers can only look one way. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit more about how that's manifested. Um, yeah.
Oh, well, I think what became really clear for me when it was just Shireen and I working together at the Circle was that the kind of work that is required to um, truly run a national organization and be one that develops and creates responsive, high value programming to its members requires a lot of different skill sets, and it requires a lot of different kinds of expertise and care.
Mhm.
Additionally, the level of relationship, the investment that it takes to build a level of relationship of connection and accountability and curiosity with individuals or with organizations is not a light lift. It's a heavy load. It requires time and energy and thoughtfulness.
Mm.
So, thinking about the seasonal pathway made me reflect upon the kind of ways in which we needed to have folks with particular characteristics who could embody the season of winter, spring, summer, and fall. And that
Mm.
folks who had some characteristics who could embody the season would also bring with them a range of technical and relational skill sets that would be very helpful in the season that they care for and they steward. What that means is I think we have an incredibly diverse team, not only in terms of lived experience and location and education and personal interests and career pathways, uh,
Mhm.
but it also means that we recognize that so many of us have an opportunity to both learn from and alongside each other. And I think this is an experience I've not had anywhere else that I've worked. So I'm really thankful for it here. Um, the the one thing that is important, recognizing that kind of diversity, is that to do our work well, we are required to be very thoughtful about how we show up to our work.
Right.
And so it means that there are things that are baked into the DNA of our organization that help us kind of orient to how it is that we can host ourselves to show up for this work in a way, how we participate alongside one another, host one another, but also co-create our wisdom and our work together. Um, which is the fourfold that you might
Mhm.
remember from the art of reciprocity work. And so it's integral for us. We have team check-ins and we have checkouts, and our team check-in on Monday always follows a format of head, heart, hand, which
Mhm.
is really just building a practice for reflection and discernment and alignment for action. And we do that on Mondays because Mondays usually when people start work. Those are also opportunities for the team to share in whatever way is comfortable and appropriate for them, like how they're doing and how their weekend was. And so I think that that's been a really important practice is that there's always music. There's always quiet time for people to reflect
Yeah.
on specifically generated questions that change week to week. And then people can identify what level of sharing that they want to have in that time and space. And then on Thursdays, we do a checkout that's really an opportunity to identify a place to celebrate, to get thinking about how to kind of reset and bring wellness to their body and spirit headed into the weekend, but also to think about what's coming up in the week to come. So
Mm.
again, building in those practices as kind of mandatory ways that folks are invited to show up means that they're not doing it before they get to work, and they're not doing it after they leave work. They're doing it
Mm.
on work time during work hours. And so this is something that has been really interesting, and it might not feel like it's connected, but I'll share just a couple of things we do when we onboard folks. Folks are invited to onboard, and we intentionally create a very slowed down pace for them. And what's very interesting is just how difficult it is for folks to slow down. They feel like they want to like hit the ground running, and I'm like, we're not interested in that. That's really
Yeah.
unhelpful. Actually,
Yeah.
we need you to like decompress and actually like decondition your thinking and your the places you've come from. We need you to kind of loosen that up. And
Mm,
one of the things that becomes quite necessary is like I have to keep reminding people that they are invited to do things like set up their desk in their home office during work hours
yeah.
and to learn how to use new technology during work hours, and that they should set up a filing system during work hours. All of these things that folks usually do before they start work or after hours is something we say, no, that is work time, and you will be compensated for it, and it should only happen during work time.
Mm,
Um, and it's really interesting what comes up for folks. The ideas, especially, which has been so deeply socialized in us, we're an all woman team, that we've been so deeply socialized to have, and being indigenous or racialized, having to justify our time and
right.
to prove our worth and have to work 3 times harder than anyone else to be taken seriously. um, and all of those things have to be really interrogated, and we need to create the kind of space for undoing that kind of harm.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, and it's but it's a very specific investment we make in folks who work with us. That's like, no, this is a requirement of doing the work, and need folks to kind of slow down, work through those pieces, and really come to understand what it means to do work in a different set of time, with a different kind of priority, with a different level of discernment and intention to serve.
I'm curious as one of the leaders of the circle, what is bringing you joy in this?
Oh my gosh, my team would be so delighted. I feel like they fed you this question. Um, it is true that it can be really difficult. I have a much easier time creating a container for thinking and doing the work differently, and can be really hard on myself and default to behaviors of white supremacy around perfectionism and either or thinking. Um,
Mm,
and I feel like, I just am so privileged to work with such an amazing group of humans who are more and more quick to remind me about how important my own well-being is. So I feel that, there's a lot of laughter when our team is together. There's
mm,
always music. I
mm,
think that that's a huge part of centering joy for me. So my partner is a singer-songwriter and a musician. We have a shared love for music. Seeing live music is that's church for us. Like that's where we go to
mm.
reset and like have our moments of divinity and connection. Um, so, thinking about shows over the summer, outdoor summer festivals to hear music is something that really is special for us. Um, my son is home right now in a season in his life when he's like moved back in with us. And so that's incredibly delightful.
Mm,
I just love the young adult human that he is and that he continues to become. But ultimately, the biggest piece is that over the last few years, I've made a commitment to return home here to my territory, in different points between May and October. And that brings me so much joy, being able to just like see my family and like run into them in the hallway,
mm,
to like bring my nieces together to do a moon ceremony, to go to any number of lakes in this area and just be in the water that my ancestors have been in. Those
mm.
are the things that bring me joy and fill me up. So it's something that I have to be very intentional about making time and space for. And that's a deep commitment that I have to deconditioning white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism in my own body, in my own thinking, is like to
Mm.
be in the water in my territories.
I feel like this is a natural space to end, unless there's anything else that you're feeling like I didn't quite dive deep in terms of questioning, or not even questioning, sharing knowledge, I guess, is what it feels like more to me. But yeah, if
I mean, I feel like there continues to be a huge gap in the sector, and the gap is not actually in the doing, it's in the financing of the doing.
Mm,
So when we talk about decent work, I think we need to be very clear with funders and with governments who are, making legislation or policies related to decent work, that they're actually thinking about how they invest in the financial realities. It
yes.
costs money to
Yeah.
be a decent work employer, and we're proud to expend those funds. And it's in fact necessary and absolutely like non-negotiable. It is a requirement of doing the work that we want to do in the world with an orientation towards justice.
Mm,
Um, but I do think that funders can do more to specifically invest in the kind of decent work initiatives that we've been able to do, or that others have done. And we've made these investments not because there was a funder who was supporting us to do decent work.
yeah.
It's because we said we have some revenues that we've generated, and we're going to particularly focus on investing them in well-being for this organization and for the team. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's no funder out there who's ever asked us about our decent work practices, or
Mm-hmm.
who's ever said, please let us support your decent work practices. So
Mm,
that being said, I think what folks should know is at the Circle, we are deeply committed to, inviting settler philanthropic members to figure out how they can support, increased job security and wellness in workplaces for Indigenous-led organizations. And we hope to see deeper investments for longer periods of time in this kind of work.
mm,
Huge thanks and gratitude to ONN
mm.
for this work. We've just like, I go to this website and to the resources that are there, and I just feel like it's been so helpful to me. ONM has just been so helpful to me as a leader of this organization in so many ways, and so I just can't say enough how thankful I am for the Ontario Nonprofit Network as well. So thank you.